Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Pesachim Samach Aleph. We are on Samach Hamad Beis at the wide lines, the first wide line from the bottom. So it's 6 lines from the bottom. In the middle of that first wide line, Iboilu. We know that a Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach is meant to be brought strictly Lishmoi. If it's Shalei Lishmoi, it's Pasal. However, if it's Shalei Bizmani, say it's a week before Pesach. The halacha is, if you take that very same Korban Pesach and you bring it Shalei Lishmoi, for instance, you have in mind, I'm doing a Shlomim, then this Korban Pesach now turns into a Shlomim. We know that applies when there was a Shini Kodesh. She's deviating from the designation of the actual Korban. Instead of doing it L'Shem Pesach, he's doing it L'Shem a different Korban, L'Shem Shlomim. Then this halacha applies, and this Korban is kosher, although not a Pesach, it's a Shlomim. What happens if there's a Shini Baalim? He changes the designation of the owner. So he's doing a Shchita on this Korban Pesach, a week before Pesach. Instead of changing the actual title of the Korban, he changes the designation of the owner. It belongs to Reuven and he's doing it L'Shem Shimon. Is that called an Akira? Is that considered an uprooting of the status, of the title, of the designation? Is that enough of an Akira to turn this into a Shlom? Iboilu. So the Bnei Yeshiva asked the following shayla: Pesach sheshchatoi b'shar yemais hashana. This Korban Pesach, who a shchita was done to it outside of its prescribed time, not on Yud Dalet, not Yud Gimel, a week before Pesach, b'shini balam, Mao, and he did it with a shinoi balam. Instead of doing it for the sake of the rightful owner, he did the avodah for the sake of somebody else. What is the halacha here? Shinoi balam ke shinoi kodesh dami. Do we say that just as shinoi kodesh, changing the title of the korban, turns it into a shlomim, likewise shinoi balam, changing the designation of the owner, likewise turns this into a shlomim? Machshali, and makes it kosher. Or perhaps you can equate Shinoi Balim to Shinoi Kodesh, which perhaps is more related to the essence of the korban. That's called changing the korban, but Shinoi Balim is not really so related to the guf kedushas ha-korban, and a Shinoi on that regard perhaps will not accomplish the same. Omar Papa Amrisa Lishmata. I presented my opinion in front of Rava that, the two things are very much alike. Since we find that when there's a Shini Kodesh, Bizmane, on Yudalad, Benisan, Erev Pesach, this fellow changed the designation of the actual korban. Instead of doing it L'Shem Pesach, he's doing it L'Shem Shlomim. It's Paisel. We learned yesterday that a Korban Pesach needs to be done L'Shem Pesach. V'shini balim paisli bizmane, and likewise a shinoi regarding the owner also makes it possible if it's taking place bizmane and yudalit. So since we find that these two things are very similar in nature, shini kodesh and shini balim will affect psul when they're done on yudalit b'nisan, let's compare further. Ma shini kodesh she paisli bizmane, just as shinoi in the guf, in the title, in the kedusha of the korban, which is something that makes it possible if it took place bismani. But if it takes place out of its prescribed time, a week before Pesach, that shini would actually make it kosher, turn it into a shlomim. Same thing regarding shini balim, which has the power to make it possible when it's bismani. So if it's out of its man, it will make it kosher. Let's compare the two things. Just as Shini Kodesh is a reason for kashrus when it's Shlei Bizmane, likewise Shini Baal. V'amar li, and Rava responded, you can't compare. Loi, im amrit b'Shini Kodesh. If this halacha applies to Shini Kodesh, that's because it has no less than 4 advantages over Shini Baal. Number 1, Shekem Psuli B'Gufay. Shini Kodesh is connected inherently to the essence of the korban. He's changing it from a Pesach to a Shlomim, as opposed to Shini Balim, which isn't so closely related to the Guf HaKorban. That's number 1. Number 2, V'yeshli ba'arba avodas. The concept of Shini Kodesh, generally, by all other Karbanis, applies to all four of the primary avodas. There was a Shini Kodesh by the Shechita, by the Kabbalah, by the Halacha, by the Zrika. When it comes to other Kabbanis, it makes it possible. As opposed to Shini Balam, as Rashi explains, that only applies by the Dam, by the Zrika, because the Kapara is by the Zrika. And the Kapara is meant for the Bailam. So Shini Bailam over there makes it possible, but doesn't apply by the Shechita or the Kabbalah Halacha. That's another Mala that Shini Kodesh has over Shini Bailam. Number 3, V'yesh Lachamisa. Shini Kodesh applies even after the owner passed away, as opposed to Shini Bailam, certainly doesn't apply then. Number 4, V'yesh B'tzibah K'b'yachad. Shini Kodesh applies by a carbon tzibah just as by a carbon yachad, as opposed to Shini Bailam, which doesn't apply by a carbon tzibah. What is he doing? Instead of having in mind this yid, he's having in mind the other yid. Well, everybody is equally a Bailam. He's not changing it to a non-Bailam, it's a public carbon. As the Gemara explains, Torah b'Shini Bailam, how could you apply, how could you say the same by Shini Bailam, which is a less severe deviation? The Ein Psuli b'Gufay, it's not something which relates to the Gufa carbon, it relates to its owner. Ve'ena ba'arba avodas, doesn't apply by all four avodas, only by Zrika. Ve'ena lachamisa, doesn't apply after death. Ve'ena b'tzibur k'b'yachad, it doesn't apply by carbon tzibur as by carbon yachad. So perhaps, since Shini Kodesh is more powerful, that change, that Shini, can be oiker, the Korban Pesach, and turn into a Shlomim, but not Shini Bailam. It doesn't have that power. Va'arfal gav the Tati la Dafka. You meant to know that certainly 2 of these 4 are not necessarily so. Who wants to move them on the list? As the Gemara soon will explain. But tar to me a Dafka, but 2 of them are very much on target and accurate. We have 2 discrepancies, 2 advantages that Shini Kodesh has over Shini Bailam. As the Gemara explains, that 2 of them really don't apply. The Maishna, Shini Bailam. Why is it that you say that Shini Bailam is the lo yave psule begufay? It's not considered an inherent psul in the essence of the carbon. Why is that? The psule machshava ba'almahi. Because it's not pertaining to the physicality of the carbon. It's just a machshava, something outside, beyond the carbon. The psula machshava ba'almi. Therefore, you don't consider it psula b'gufay. Now, if that's the case, shini kodesh nami. That type of shini is also of a similar nature. Psulay machshava ba'almi. It's coming through a machshava. It's not connected to the actual chayfetz of the carbon. So really, in that regard, you cannot say shini kodesh is more powerful than Shini Bailam. They're both not Psuli B'Gufay. Okay, so that cannot be mentioned on the list of discrepancies. And in addition, we have the other one, Vesu. Additionally, Had Amar Shini Bailam Ein Lachamisa. This that you have said that Shini Bailam doesn't apply after Misa and Shini Kodesh does. Well, not necessarily. Ugarav Pinchas, Bredarav Ami, the Amar Yesh Shinui Bailam Lachamisa. According to him, that Shini Bailam can apply Lachamisa. Michael and Meimer. So what are you going to say? So you don't have that as a difference between Shini Kodesh and Shini Bailam. So these 2 need to be removed off the list. Tar to miyas dafkaninu. But at least 2 of those items are accurate and true. The 2 being the fact that Shini Kodesh applies to all 4 avodas. The other one, that Shini Kodesh applies even to a carbon tzibur, which both of these things are not applicable to Shini Bailam. So therefore you can't compare one to the other. Elam Rabbah responded like this. Actually, Shini Bailam won't help. Will not be considered a reason to be machshir the carbon Pesach a week before Pesach. The reason is as follows. Pesach sheshchat, b'shayim eis b'shini Bailam. You know what happens? Nasa k'mish eile Bailam, b'zmanei, upasal. What happens to a carbon Pesach who is missing its owner? His owner passed away. The carbon Pesach becomes possible. You can't be makar of a carbon without an owner. A carbon Pesach, that is. Says Rava, when you go ahead and you take the carbon Pesach and you deviate, you mishana from the Baalim, instead of doing it for the rightful owner, you be makar for a different owner. It's as though this carbon Pesach has no owner. It's ownerless. It's as though this carbon Pesach would be bezmani without an owner. And it's possible. Therefore here as well, taking this carbon Pesach, even a week before Pesach, and rendering it ownerless, so to speak, is actually a reason to make it possible and not to make it kosher. So in conclusion, we had a question regarding a Korban Pesach being nishchat shaloi bezmanai, which we know that if you do it b'shinei kodesh, for the sake of a shlamim, it makes it kosher. This Pesach has a din of a shlamim. What happens to shinei bailam? The conclusion is, it's possible. It's absolutely possible because it's as though the Pesach has no bailam. And that itself is a reason for it to be possible. Continues the Mishnah. Shchatei shaloi lo'ichlav. What if he did the shchita on the Korban Pesach for the sake of individuals who don't have ability to eat? A chayla, a zaken, who cannot eat a kazayis. The point of the Korban Pesach is to be eaten. The shchita certainly is meant to enable achila. If it's shaloi lo'ichlav, it's not a good shchita. Or shaloi lo'menuyav, or if it's for the sake of individuals who aren't counted in, haven't joined as members of this Korban Pesach group. La arelim, or he did the shchita for the sake of arelim, a person who hadn't had a bris. Rashi always explains that when it comes to arelim by Korban Pesach, we're speaking about a person who was prevented from doing the milah for health reasons. Ula tmeim, or he did the shchita for tmeim. So these are additional examples of people who cannot eat the Korban Pesach, possible, because the shchita has to take place for the sake of people who can eat. What about if he mixed and matched? He did the shchita for the sake of a group who were partially oichlim, partially not oichlim. Part of them were arelim. Lo oichlav v'shlo lo oichlav. He did the shchita for a group of people. Some of them had the ability to eat, healthy. Some did not have the ability. Or he mixed. Some people were counted as part of the chabur, and he also did it for others who were not part of the chabur. Or for a group of people who were partially mulim, and part of them arelim. Or some of them were tmeim and some tayrim. Kosher. Why? Because as long as you have at least some people, even one person, who can eat the korban, who's eligible, who's an oichel, he has the ability to eat, he's part of the group, he's a mul, he's a tar, then the shchita is applied for that person. Because even a kazayis needs shchita. So even if there's one person who's considered a proper oichel, then the shchita is for him. The fact that he mixed in other people does not harm the korban. Continues the Mishnah. Shchata kodem chatzos is possible. If the shchita took place before chatzos, it's possible. Shnamar bein arba'im. It's meant to be in the afternoon. What about shchata kodem l'tamid? We learned the other day that the Korban Pesach is meant to follow the tamid because it has a lashon of be'erev and bein arba'im. What if he did it before the tamid? It's kosher. So by the evidence, it's kosher. Ubelvad, provided shehei acher memareis bedame. Somebody should stand there and mix the dam of the Pesach to prevent it from hardening. Achi yizarach tamid. Wait until the dam of the tamid will be applied to the mizbeach, and then afterwards follow with the dam of Pesach. But if it is kosher, if b'diavad they did the zrika on the Pesach even before the tamid, b'diavad it's kosher. Tanu Rabban. Ketzad shloi lo'ichlav. What does the Mishnah mean? He did the shchita shloi lo'ichlav. L'shem chayla, for the sake of a ill person who cannot eat a kazayis, or l'shem zaken, who can't eat a kazayis. Ketzad shloi l'mnuyav. What does it mean? Shchita shloi l'mnuyav. Nimnu olav chaburazu. This group of people counted themselves in for this Korban Pesach. And he chose to do the shchita for the sake of another group. And in both cases, the Korban Pesach is possible. How do we know? Then indeed, the Korban Pesach needs to be nishchat for the sake of oichlin, for the sake of menuyim, the Tanu Rabbanan. B'michsas. The pasuk says, you take the Korban Pesach, and b'michsas nefashos ish lefi ochlei tochoisu alaseh. We learn from here, melamesh en Pesach nishchat elo menuyav. The Pesach needs to be shechted for the sake of its members. How do we see that from b'michsas? Let's drop down, take a look at Rashi. Rashi here has 4 lines from the bottom of the Yom, but michsas. Says Rashi, loshen menuyin. People that were counted in. K'moy es michsas erkecha. It's loshen of counting. So the shechita has to take place for the sake of its members. Continues the Gemara. Fine, you meant to do so, but what happens if you ignore this mandate? If he did a shaloi l'mnuyav, yeika over la mitzvah, the kosher. Perhaps, okay, he was over on the mitzvah, but it's still kosher, it's not meyakiv. Tamar Loimar, the pasuk repeats it. B'michsas, and then concludes, Ish lefi achlei tachoisu alaseh. So b'michsas and tachoisu are both indicating the same thing. HaKosav shina olav la'akav. The Torah repeats it twice. And we know this is a klal by kachim. Whenever we have a repetition, it indicates that it's ma'akev. It validates if you ignore it. So the din of shchita l'bnuyav is ma'akev. Now, of course, this only applies to the shchita. When it comes to zrika, we're going to learn in the upcoming sugya. By zrika, there's no concept of bimachashev for the oichlan, for the benuyim. It's unique to shchita, which is there to enable the achila. Shchita makes it right achila. Rabbi Yehuda Loshen sursihu. How do we know that it applies only to the shchita? Because the pasuk, by using the loshen tachoisu, which is really a loshen sursihu. What does that mean? It's a Syrian dialect of Aramaic. Syria was situated between Eretz Yisrael, where they spoke loshen kodesh, and Bavel, where they spoke Aramaic. So it was an in-between, it was a synthesis of the two languages. So Tochaisu, mentioned in the pasuk, is actually in this language. In this language it means shchita. Like a person tells his friend, Kais, li talize, shecht for me this carbon, this lamb, this tali. So Tochaisu alaseh, in this pasuk, is referring strictly to shchita, which is meant to be l'shem the oichlim and l'shem the menuyim. Ashichan shaloi l'menuyim. So we just learned that the Torah repeats the din of the menuyim designation twice to teach us that it's ma'akiv. So we know that the ikuv applies to shchita shaloi l'menuyim. If you did the shchita for people who aren't members, it's possible. Shaloi l'oichlim b'nalan. What if you did the shchita for the sake of people who can't, who are not capable of properly eating the carbon? So you know we're not meant to do it. Because it says, but how do we know that it's ma'akiv? The pasuk here connects both halachas. Because ishlafi achlei teaches us that the shchita must take place for the sake of oichel. Tochaisu teaches us for the sake of members. Iskish oichel and menuyin. Here the Torah connects the two concepts, the l'shem oichel and the l'shem menuyin, to teach us, just as the halacha of menuyin is ma'akiv, likewise the halacha l'shem oichel is also ma'akiv. So at this point we learned that when it comes to carbon Pesach, the shchita of the carbon must be for the sake of oichlin, for the sake of menuyin. However, when it comes to zrika, there's no such stipulation. What happens in an in-between scenario? He was in the middle of doing the shchita, and he's thinking to himself, look, this shchita is for the sake of oichlin, for the sake of menuyin. But I'm doing the shchita also as an additional element. Also, in order to prepare the dam here, the dam that's being produced by the shchita, and take that dam, I'm preparing in order to take that dam and be zorik it eventually for non-eaters. Shaloi l'shem oichel. So although, as we just said, when it comes to the zrika itself, if he zorik the dam shaloi l'shem oichel, there's no harm done. But here, that's not what happened. It was during the shchita, which needs to be l'shem oichel. He's thinking to himself that I'm preparing now the dam for the sake of a zrika, which I'm going to do shaloi l'shem oichel. What is the halacha there? It's a hybrid scenario. Shachtoi lemulin al manashe iskaper ba'arelim bizrika. So he did the shchita l'shem the mulin, shame people who can eat, people that had a bris milah. But he's thinking, and he's saying, I'm doing this conditionally. Al manas, for the sake, she is chaper ba'arelim bizrika. When it comes to the zrika, I'm going to use this very same dam that I'm producing now through a shchita, and be zerik it, be mechaper for arelim, people that are not eligible eaters. Let's see Rashi on top. Shachtei lahachile lemulin. Menuyin. The shchita is for the sake of feeding it, enabling the achila for people who are mulin, who had a bris milah, who are menuyin, who are members. Avol. Here's the catch. Avol yischaper bizrikasi arelim. But he intends on using the zrika to be mechaper for arelim. Oy menuyin, oy she'eni menuyin, whether or not they're members of the carbon. So what's the halacha here? We have a machlekes. Rav Chizda Amar Pasel. Because the fact is, it's taking place when? During the shechita. In which case it has to be l'shem oichel. So although it's applied to zrika, but when is it happening? During his involvement with the shechita. Because it says it's possible. Rabba Amar Kasher. Because this machshava pertains to zrika. And during zrika, you don't have to have l'shem oichel. Now l'shem oichel is strictly a shechita stipulation, because shechita enables the achila. So it needs to be l'shem, people who are allowed to eat. As opposed to our case where the shechita was perfectly legal. He's doing the shechita for the sake of eaters. But he's thinking that I'm right now preparing the dam to do zrika later on for non-eaters. No harm is done. Because zrika doesn't have to be for eaters. Explains the Gemara. Rav Chizda Amar Pasel, yesh machshavas arelim bezrika. This type of machshavas arelim, to prepare it for people who are non-eaters, will make it possible. Yesh machshavas arelim bezrika. Even when it's applied to the zrika, because it's taking place right now during the shechita. Rabba Amar Kasher, ein machshavas arelim bezrika. The machshavas arelim that's applied to the zrika won't make it possible. Amar Rabba mina minala. How do I know that it is so? That if he's doing the shechita, and the shechita itself is for people who have a bris, mulim, eligible candidates to go eat the carbon, they're achoichlam. But his machshava is that I'm preparing dam for zrika, sheloi l'shem oichel, a zrika for arelim. How do I know that it's kosher? From the following brisa, the Sanya. The brisa begins with a pasuk, v'chol oreil lo yochal boy. The Gemara learns this to mean that if he's doing the shechita for a group of people who are arelim, who are not oichlim, this carbon is possible. What if only part of the group are arelim? Some are oichlim, some are people who have a bris. Only miktzas orla. There's only partial orla here. What happens then? Yochal yifsal b'nei chabura haboyin imay. Perhaps this person who's an orla will invalidate the shechita on behalf of the other b'nei chabura who are accompanying him. The fact that the Karban Pesach was nishchat, even for miktzas orla, for a group which is comprised of even part arelim, perhaps that invalidates the entire process. Says the Movedinu, no, we're going to use the following formula to teach us that it's not so. Only if the shechita was entirely l'shem arelim, as the Mishnah explained, we'll make it possible. But if it's for a group of people who are partly oichlim and partly arelim, it's going to be kosher. Vedinu. Let's apply the following formula. Since this case that we just mentioned, orla, makes the carbon possible. If he does a shechita l'shem and orla, it's possible. He's a non-eater. The tumah peiselis. Likewise, if he does a shechita for the sake of a tummy person, it's paisel the carbon. Let's draw a parallel from one to the other. Ma tumah, lo yosab miktzas tumah kechal tumah. Just as when it comes to tumah, the Torah did not regard partial tumah like complete tumah. So let's say we have a group of people, some are tumah, some are tor, no harm is done. Why is this a given? The Gemara later will explain. So that's a known fact. Mixas tumah causes no harm. Likewise, af arla. Same thing when it comes to arla. We don't deem partial arla like a complete arla. So as long as part of the group that the shechita is intended for are mulim, are not arelim, that's okay. We derive arla from tumah. Mixas is not paisel. Or perhaps go the other way around. Let's compare arla to something else. Since arla is paisel the carbon, the shechita was for the sake of an arla, it's possible. Zman paisel, and likewise, we have a concept called zman, which makes paisel. Zman here is in reference to pickle. So he did the shechita on the carbon with a machshava to eat a kazayas of that carbon, chutz l'zmanai, in 3 days' time. Out of its prescribed zman achila, that carbon becomes pickle. Now, the machshava there was only applied to a very small portion of the carbon. His machshava was to eat just merely a kazayis, chutz zman. That is enough to make the carbon pasul. So let's compare the psul of Orla to the psul of Zman. Man Zman, just like by Zman, also by Mikzas Zman Kechol Zman, we regarded even a Mikzas Zman, even if his kavanah only applied to one kazayis, which he's going to eat next week. Kechol Zman, we consider it, we treat it like as though we had a complete machshava on the entire carbon. It makes it completely possible. Of Orla, likewise by Orla. Also by Mikzas Orla Kechol Orla. Even a portion of Orla would be considered like a complete Arla. So the Shechita was done for the sake of even one Arla, even if his friends are not Arla. That should be sufficient reason to make it possible. Let's compare Arla to Zman, to Pickle. So now we have a dilemma. We have Arla in the middle, and we want to know what to compare it to. To Tuma, where Mikzas is not Paisel, or to Zman, where Mikzas is Paisel. So which way should we go? Near Limidaima. Let's see. Who is more similar to? Says the Gemara, he's more similar to Tami. Why? Don and Dover. Let's learn something which doesn't really generally apply to other kabbalas. What is that? Arla. Rashi says that, generally speaking, even an Arl can bring his carbon. So this halacha that an Arl cannot join a carbon is unique, is exclusive to carbon Pesach. So let's learn that concept, the Orla which is exclusive to carbon Pesach, from something else that is similar to it in nature, that is also exclusive to the carbon Pesach. Midavar she'ein lo yibchal zmachem. What is that? Tumah. Tumah, like Orla, is something which is unique to carbon Pesach, because, again, a person's tummy generally can bring a carbon. He can send his carbon to Beis Hamikdash. He's not prevented from bringing a carbon. This exclusion of a Tameh is unique to Carbon Pesach. So Arla and Tameh are very similar in nature. Let's learn one from the other. And just like by Tumah, partial Tumah doesn't make Psul, by Arla as well. If part of the group are Arelim, it won't poison the carbon. But don't bring a raya from Pigel, which applies to all Karbanis equally. So Arla is more similar in nature to Tumah. Therefore, let's learn from there. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Or perhaps, let's go in the other direction. Let's connect Arla to Pigel. You know why? Because they also have a similarity. Something which is unique to them, which is not by Tuma. Don and Dover. Let's learn Arla, which is something that has no exceptions. Midover shlehuta mikloli. From Pigel, which also doesn't have exceptions. Don't bring a raya from Tuma, shehutra miklol, which has exceptions. What type of exception? When is it hutar miklole from its general klal? When do we have an exception by Tuma? So Rashi says, a carbon Pesach, which was ba betuma. So if most of Yisrael were Tamei, for instance, they'll bring their carbon Pesach in that state of Tuma, and they'll eat it as well. So we find that Tumah has leeway, has exceptions. And therefore when we look to find a source for the halacha by Arla, whether Mikzas is paisel or not, let's choose Tumah, let's choose Pigel, Zman, which is more similar in nature to Arla, because both of them have no exceptions. There are no leeways when it comes to Pigel, when it comes to Arla. So just as Pigel, even Mikzas creates psul, because even if he has a machshava just on a kazayis, that's enough to make it puzzle. Arla as well, even if just part of the group are Arla, makes it puzzle. As opposed to Tumah, which has exceptions. It's Tumah klal, therefore you can't derive from there. So now we have to look for a source. Again, we're trying to figure out what is the halacha if a person takes a Karban Pesach and does the shechita for the sake of a group of individuals who are partially Arelim. Some of them are Arelim. So it's not completely for Arelim, but it is Mikzas Arla. What is the halacha? Talmud Lema, the Brisa continues, quoting a pasuk, Zois. And somehow this is going to teach us the halacha. Really? My Zois? How does Zois pertain to our discussion? we're trying to prove that Miktsas Erla doesn't do any harm. How do you see anything from Zois in that regard? Is it this that we're trying to learn out? That only if the entire group are Arelim, it's possible. But if it's partially Arelim, it doesn't possible. That's not learned from Zois. That's learned from the pasuk, which indicates that only if the entire process was for the Arelim, then you have a problem on your hands. But if it's only partially Arelim, you're okay. You don't need Zois for that. Apparently when the Brisa quoted Zois, it was pertaining to another matter altogether, a different halacha. So let's go slowly. We had a question, what about Mixas Arla? That we know from the pasuk of V'chol Arel. Talmud Leina V'chol Arel, which teaches us Kula Arla Pasla, Mixas Arla Pasla. Okay, that's off the table. You wanted to know the halacha by Mixas? Very simple. It says V'chol Arel. Only if the shechita was for the sake of an entire group who are Arelim. It's completely Shloi Lo Ichlav. You're preparing the basa here for people who are not eligible eaters. That's what makes it possible. But if it's only Miktsas Arelim, as long as there's somebody that can eat, shechita applies to him. And we learn that from the pasuk of B'chol Arel. Only if it's completely Arel. Okay, so once that's taken care of, let's proceed to the next aspect. And for that we need the pasuk of Azais. Continues the Gemara. V'chitei hu adin l'zrika. So perhaps the same concept will apply to Zrika. If there's Erla, it's possible. Meaning, although we mentioned earlier, as Tosfos explains, that if during the Zrika he applied the dam for the sake of an Arelim, that doesn't do anything because, as we explained, the concept of Oichel doesn't apply to Zrika. It's unique and exclusive to Shechita, which enables the Basal Achila. What the Gemara means here, Hu Adin L'Zrika, that the same concept of L'Shem Arelim will apply to Zrika, it's in the case that we're discussing. It was during the Shechita process that he had in mind that I'm preparing the dam to be Zorik for the Arel. So perhaps there you have a problem on your hands because it was during the Shechita, which enables Achila. Perhaps the same thing will apply to Zrika. The Kula Arel Meir Pasla. Again, he did the Shechita. And while doing the Shechita, he has in mind to prepare this dam for the Zrika for an entire group of Arelim. Perhaps that will make it possible. That's where Zois comes into the picture. Zois is a miut, exception. But Shechita with the Kula Arel Meir Pasla, only during the Shechita. If he's doing the Shechita for the sake of a group of Arelim, then it's possible. Aval Zrika, but if there's Zrika involved, if the Zrika is for the sake of the Arelim, Filu Kula Arla Namila Pasla, even if it's entirely going to be for a group of Arelim, there's no psulim. This is a right to Rabbi. Rabbi was the one who said that if he's Shechet al Banas to use the dam for Arelim, it's kosher. Only Shechita for the sake of Shechita can't be done for the Arelim. Shechita has to be for eaters. But if the machshava of Shloi Lo Ichlav is applied to Zrika, there's no harm. V'chitema, perhaps you'll say, what's the difference? Why discriminate on Zrika? My kula de Zrika. Why is Zrika more lenient than Shechita? The answer is, the machshava is Eichel Zrika. Because by Zrika, this concept of machshava Eichel doesn't apply. Shechita enables Achila. You're being sheichet, the carbon, you're making the basa mutal Achila. Then, you have to know what you're doing. You have to be doing it for the sake of Eichel. But when it comes to Zrika, the concept of Eichel doesn't apply. So at this point, we have a right to Rabbah. There are two elements, two parts in this price. Number one, if the Shechita is for the sake of Arelim, it's Tameh, but only if it's completely for Arelim. That's learned from the pasuk of V'chol Arel. It has to be completely Arel. But if it's only partially Arel, it's for Arel and for a person who had a Milah, then it's fine. Aspect number two is, if during the Shechita, he's preparing dam for a Zrika for Arelim, here as well it's completely kosher. Even if it's completely going to be a Zrika l'shem Arelim, there's no harm because Zois teaches us machshavas oichlim, machshavas Arelim, etc. only applies to the Shechita, cannot relate to Zrika. So this was Rabbi's mocker to his halach. Rav Chizda will respond, no. The Rabbi, just the opposite. L'idach Yisa. Let's go in the other direction. Meaning, Zois is a mute. Correct? It's coming to make an exception here. According to Rav Chizda, the exception will be that Zrika is actually more severe, more chamer than Shchita. So if he did the Shchita, and during that Shchita, he has in mind, al manas, that the Zrika will be for the sake of a group who are partially part of Ma'arelim, even mitzvahs Orla, because it pertains to Zrika, it's going to be possible. So Rav Chizda is adopting an approach in the other direction altogether. Zrika is actually more chamer than Shchita in this context. Ad Rabbi Idachis. So he explains like this. Let's go back to the Brisa, which began discussing Shchita, of course. So when he did the Shchita for the sake of a group of Arelim, it's possible. Because the Shchita enables Achila, it needs to be Lo'echla. What about if it's Mixas Arla, part of the Arelim? We want to know the halacha. And the Brisa says, Talmud Loimar, V'chol Orel, V'chol is teaching us Kula Orla Pasla. If it's completely Orla, it's possible. Mixas Arla Pasla, if it's only partially, it's okay. That's with respect to Shchita. As we explained, because even if you have one person who can eat it, you've already done a good Shchita. Let the Shchita apply to that person. Because he can't have his kazayas without a Shchita. So even if there's one eligible oich, that's enough. That's because it's Shchita. Aval Zrika. But Zrika, which brings kapara, over there, says Rav Chizda, even if it's a mixed group, some of them are mulim and some of them are relim, since the Zrika will bring a kapara for arelim who aren't really meant to be part of the korban, that is detrimental to the kashrus hakorban. Aval Zrika afilu miksasa nami pasla. Even if they're only part arelim, it makes it possible. And that's the pasuk of Zois. V'chitem hu adin l'zrika. Says Rav Chizda, well, maybe you'll argue and say, well, the same halacha that applies to Shchita will apply to Zrika. The adika kula arla loy pasla. Until you have an entire group of arelim, it won't make it possible. Why should Zrika be worse than Shchita? Talmud lema Zois. That's why the Brisa introduces the second word, the second pasuk, Zois, to tell us that Zrika is different than Shchita. It's more chamor than Shchita. Shchita who the mektsasa le'pasl. By Shchita, we have this concept that partial arelim won't harm. Aval Zrika, when it comes to Zrika, which is meant to bring the kapar, afilu mektsasa pasla, even if it's partially oral, it makes it possible. Perhaps you'll say, oh my chumer de Zrika. Why should Zrika be more chamer? Why should we say that Zois is coming to say that Zrika is more chamer? Rather than saying like Rabba that Zrika is actually more kal and for the sake of Arelim never affects the Zrika. Why should we go in this direction rather than the other direction? The answer is that Zrika we find elsewhere carries more weight than Shchita. And therefore, it justifies the Chumrah here as well. The loy mikba pigul ela b'Zrika. Rashi explains that the Gemara means that generally, when a person does pigul, so the Shchita was in order to eat a kazayis shloi bezmaneh. We have to wait until all four avodas, until the Zrika was done. Otherwise, the pigul is still pending. Zrika is the conclusion of the avodas and brings about the application and manifestation of the pigul status. So when mikba pigul doesn't get established el b'Zrika until you have the Zrika. So you see that Zrika is actually superior to Shchita. Because although the machshava took place perhaps by the Shchita, but he has to wait for the Zrika to establish the pigul. So Zrika has a chumrah over Shchita in here as well, says Rav Chizda. Although when it comes to Shchita, if it's at least partially being done for somebody who's an oichel, that's okay, but when it comes to Zrika, it's not so. The concept that Shchita for at least one oichel is sufficient doesn't apply to Zrika. It's an entirely different concept. You're doing the kapara for oral, that makes the korban possible, even if you have others who are not Arel. So this is Rav Chizda's halacha, that if during the Shechita he had in mind two things. Number one, I'm doing the Shechita to feed it to Oichlim, to people who are out of bris milah, lemula, but he's also introducing another element to the Shechita. During the Shechita, when I produce this dam, I'm doing it almanas to take this dam eventually and be zorik it for the sake of arelim. What happens then? So Rav Chizah says it's possible. Rabbi says it's kosher, and they both base themselves on this price. They have different ways of interpreting the price. Let's proceed and explain. The brisa began with the halacha of shchita. Shchita l'shem, entire group of arelim is certainly possible. There's nobody to eat the carbon, nobody eligible. But if it's only mixas arelim, in which case the shchita can be applied at least to somebody who is an eligible eichel, that's okay. And that's learned from the pasuk of v'chol arel. Only if it's kuli arel, that's a problem. But miktas is okay. Then we have another word called zos, which has come to make an exception by zrika. The question is, which way to go? L'kula, meaning that zrika is totally exempt from this psul of l'shem arelim. That's Rabbi's opinion. Therefore, he says that in this case, when he did the shchita l'shem, in order to use the dam for arelim by the zrika, it's completely kosher, because machshavas eichlin doesn't apply to zrika at all. Whereas Rav Chizah went in the other direction. Zois is actually teaching us a chumrah by zrika, that although when it comes to shchita, miktsas doesn't do harm, but by zrika, even miktsas, even if it's partially from arl, just one arl in the mix there, that is sufficient to be poisel the carbon. And of course, we're speaking again in a case where all this happened during the shchita. So this brisa forms a basis for both shittas, Rabbi and Rav Chizah. Maskil for Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi has a problem with this pshat in the brisa. The way we understood the brisa was like this. We have two psukim. V'chol orel lo yoichaboi is coming to teach us that only if it's entirely l'shem orel does a psul. Zois, on the other hand, came and tell us there's some exception to the rule. According to one approach, it meant to apply a kula by zrika. According to the other approach, a chumrah by zrika. That's what we learned up until now. Says Rashi, how do you know? Perhaps we could interpret the psukim differently. Mimai dahai v'chol orel kula mashma. How do we know that v'chol orel is telling you only if the entire group are arelim, v'chol arel. But if it's only partially arelim, you're okay. That's by the shchita. What about by the zrika? Zois is coming to set the zrika apart. Dilma, perhaps we have to interpret the brisa differently. Dilma hai v'chol arel mashma kodu arla. You know, the word v'chol can have two meanings. V'chol arel, it's completely arel, or v'chol arel can mean even just a little bit. A small, minor element of arelis is sufficient to make it possible. Dilma hai v'chol arel mashma kodu arla. Even if only part of the group are arelim, that is sufficient reason to make the carbon possible. So that's the initiation of the brisa. V'chol arlo yechabah, perhaps it's actually coming to tell us that even a miktsas arlo by shchita makes it possible. That's why the brisa has to proceed with v'zois, because the Rachman is zois. Da'ad ikah kula arlo le'pasla. Zois is coming to provide a chiddush, an exception to the rule. No, don't say v'chol means only partially arelim. That's enough to make it possible. No, zois. Zois is saying it needs to be complete. Only if it's this way. If it's completely arelim, then you have a problem by shchita. So that was the point of the brisa. The ad, the ikakula are the lepasla. Loishna b'shchita, loishna b'zrika. This applies to shchita and to zrika. The same halacha applies to both. That what? That a mixes orla doesn't make it possible. For instance, if you did the shchita for a group of people who are partially arelim, 5 are arelim, 5 are not arelim, we learn from Zois, there's no harm done here, because as long as the shchita can be applied to a person who is a mul, person who had a bris milah, you're okay. And the same thing will apply to the zrika aspect of the carbon. For instance, if during the shchita he had in mind that I'm preparing the dam abanas, she is kapra boy arelim bezrika, here as well. If the group that he had in mind are completely arelim, then you have a problem on your hands. But if it's only mixes arla, there's no harm done. Loishnam b'shchita, loishnam b'zrika. So his kasha is on both, on Rabba and Rav Chizda. He had a certain approach to the brisa, which resulted in zrika being set apart from shchita, whether l'kula, whether l'chumra, depending on Rabba or Rav Yosef, one way or the other. How do you know that's a pshat in the brisa? Perhaps the brisa means something entirely different, and the result will be that shchita and zrika are really one and the same, have the same halacha, and therefore you don't have a raya. Both Rabba and Rav Chizda can't learn anything from this brisa pertaining to that halacha. Because perhaps, in this case, when he did the shchita for the sake of using the dam for kaparas arelim, certainly it's possible. It makes it possible, provided that it's completely for arelim, and not only for mitzvahs. So this can't be, says Rashi, this can't be the machlokes between Rabba and Chizda. Elam Rav Ashi, says Rashi, I have another approach to the machlokes. Rav Chizda b'Rabba b'haikra k'miflik. Their machlokes centers around the following pasuk. They're speaking about shini baalim, not shaloi loichla. Shini baalim. So what happened was that he did the shchita or the zrika, whatever he did there, for the sake of a person who is a non-owner. This is a machshavat shaloi lemnuyev. As we mentioned in the Mishnah, we have two things: shaloi loichla, people who can't eat because there's an oral, etc. That was the Gemara up until now. Rav Ashi has a different approach. Rav Chizda and Rava are speaking about a different concept. If either the shchita or the zrika for shaloi lemnuyev, for people who aren't members, hadn't joined as members in this carbon. Now that other person who he has in mind, this non-member also happens to be an oral. There's two problems. He's not a member, and he's also a person who's ineligible to actually have the carbon. Rav Chizda says it's puzzle. Rabbi says it's kosher. Why? Explains the Gemara. They're focusing on the following pasuk, b'haikra k'mifliki, which teaches us that you can't deviate. You can't be meshana the balim. V'nir tzaloi l'chaper olav. The carbon only works. It's nir tzaloi l'chaper olav. If the kavana during the avodah was for the sake of this person, of the rightful owner, olav v'lo chaveri. Only if he had the rightful owner in mind. But if it was done for the sake of another person who was not an owner, the carbon is not an accepted carbon. Now, Rabbi Savar, he goes like this. Chaveru dumi didei. When does shini bala make the carbon possible? So the carbon belongs to Reuven, and he had Shimon in mind. It only makes it possible if Shimon is an eligible candidate for this carbon. Ma'ud bar kapara. Just as Reuven is a bar kapara, he is an eligible candidate to have kapara from this carbon. He had a bris milah, he can have this carbon pesach. Af chavered bar kapara. His friend as well, Shimon, who you had in mind, needs to be somebody who has potential to acquire this carbon. He's a bar kapara. That's when the shini balam takes effect. La fuki hay arl, as opposed to this fellow who's an arl. This Shimon, this non-owner, is an arl. The la bar kapara. He's not an eligible candidate. He's not a potential owner to of this carbon. Having him in mind doesn't do any harm. He's not in the context of this carbon. Therefore, says Rabbah, if instead of having Reuven in mind, he did the shchita for the sake of Shimon, who is a non-owner but was also an arl, no harm was done. Rav Chizda says like this: Hi arl nami. Even this fellow who's an arl, this non-owner, even the bar chiyuvu, since he's certainly obligated to bring a carbon, bar kaparu, we consider him to be a bar kapara. He is a potential owner. Why? Because if he wishes, he can quickly fix himself up. He can run to the nearest moil and remove the arla. It's within his ability to become practically eligible for the Karm Pesach. Therefore, he's considered a potential owner, a potential bar kapara, who this Karm Pesach can apply to. And therefore, having him in mind instead of the owner, that's called Shini Bailim. So in short, Rav Ashi says the machlokes around Chizah pertains to Shini Bailim. The owner was Reuven. He did the shchita for the sake of Shimon, who happens to be an Earl as well. Rabbi says no harm was done. Shimon is not in the ballpark at all. He's not a person who can have a korban pesach. He's an arl. So no harm was done. He doesn't interfere with Reuven's ownership. But Rabbi Yehuda says, since it's within his ability to remove that arla, so he's considered a potential bar kapara of this korban, and having him in mind interferes and makes the korban possible. Okay, let's make a quick chazara of today's daf. The Gemara began with korban pesach, shaloi bezmane. So it was a week before Pesach. We know that if he did it bishini kodesh, if he did the shechita for the sake of a shlomim, this korban pesach now turns into a shlomim. What if he did shini balam? He had in mind for somebody who was not an owner. What happens there? The Gemara concluded, the name of Rava, it's possible. Because the korban pesach needs to have an owner. And this korban here is deemed as though it's ownerless, because he was Mishana the Bailim, therefore it's possible. We proceeded with the Mishnah that told us that the shechita needs to be done for the sake of people who can eat the korban, and also for the sake of people who are already members in the korban. So if it's shaloi lo'ichlov, he did it for the sake of a group who entirely can eat. This is a full group of ill people. The entire group cannot eat the korban. Then the shechita is possible. We learned that from the pasuk ishlefi achle. It needs to be for the sake of people who can eat. Same thing shloi lebnuyav. If he did the shechita for the sake of a group who are totally non-members, the entire group are non-members, this korban is possible. We learned that from michsas nefashes. It needs to be for the group, from the group. The michsas, the people who counted themselves in, became members of this korban. This only applies to the shechita. But when it comes to the zrika, the Gemara says, ein machshavas oichem bezrika. Shechita is coming to enable the achila. But zrika, that's for the sake of kapara. And therefore, the concept of lo'ichlav, or lo'nuyav, doesn't apply by the zrika, even if it was done shaloi lo'ichlav, shaloi nuyav, it's kasher. We proceeded with the machlekes between Rambam and Chizd. We have two ways to explain the machlekes. Initially, the Gemara explained as follows. He did the shechita in order to enable the achila for people who had a bris. But he also had something else in mind. Al manas, to use that dam to be zurek for arelim. Rabbi said it's kasher, Chizd said it's possible. Rabbi said it's kasher because although when it comes to shechita for the sake of arelim is possible. When it comes to zrika, we learn from the word zois that even if it's completely for arelim, it's kasher. Rabbi Chizd says just the opposite. Zois is coming to be machmer on the zrika. Even if it's partially for arla, it's already possible. According to the second approach in the Gemara, which was Rav Ashi, the machlekes pertains to the following halacha. If this fellow did a shechita or a zrika for a non-owner who happens to be Arl, Rabbi says there was no shina bailim because this fellow is a non-bal kapara. He can't relate to this korban pesach. He's an Arl. Therefore, it's not considered shini bailim and this korban is kasher. Rav Chizd says it's possible because although currently speaking he's an Arl, but if he wishes to, he can run to the mile and remove the Arla. So potentially, he's considered a bar kapara, and therefore, doing the korban for the sake of this fellow is considered a full-fledged shini bailim, and this korban pesach is now possible. All the best. Hatzlacha Rav.